Good morning, everyone. What a great morning. I mean, just the rain. I enjoy the rain. So I'll tell a story on myself. It'll start like I'm telling a story on my wife, but I'm telling it on me. So if you're listening to this, my wife in our car, she normally keeps the sunroof kind of popped open, but pretty much shut so that it can vent the hot air, right? And this morning when it's really started pouring down rain, all of a sudden I went, oh no. And so I threw clothes on and I ran outside and got all the way to the car and almost, I unlocked it and I was almost to get in it, and then I noticed, oh, it's shut. So that was an enjoyable wake up. That was fun. But I love it when it rains. I love it when it rains. It's God watering the earth. In fact, didn't just a few chapters later or earlier in Job, we talked about how God waters the earth, even if people aren't around. So that's pretty cool. So we're going to be in Job chapter 40, if you want to turn there. Through all these series of questions that God has been asking Job, he poses them to Job. He's basically, he's highlighting his power. He's highlighting his omnipotence, his just being all powerful. And he also will, allude to and make allusion to the idea that I know all this stuff, so it's also his unlimited knowledge, his power and his knowledge. And in response to Job's questioning of the Lord's justice, okay, God basically is affirming, I'm in control of this universe. Okay, I'm in control of this universe that I designed and I created. I'm all powerful, I'm all knowledgeable, and I maintain this universe. And so he's going to, a little bit now, in chapter 40, God is going to begin bending his questions and having, argued about or threw out questions about his, power and knowledge. He's now, in a way, going to be questioning things that will help Job understand his morality, his justice. The Lord said to Job, "Will the fault finder contend with the Almighty?" Or your version may say it like this: "Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him?" The question is introduced by words at the very beginning that really aren't God's. Then the Lord said to Job, right? But then the Lord's going to question. And even though God hadn't answered specifically any of his questions, it's like God's going to take this time to pause to see if Job had a reply to all the questions God has asked of him. Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? And then we really don't have an answer from Job. Job's silent, and probably using the wisdom that he's gained, he is silent. The value of questions. I want to say this a little bit about the value of questions. British author G.K. Chesterton offered some insight about the section where God is posing all these questions. God voices a series of questions to Job rather than just flat answering the questions that Job has asked. And this is what he says, quote, "The questions God raised gives a more profound view of the Lord's power and wisdom. And by asking questions, God allowed Job, listen to this, God allowed Job to reshape his rationalism. God allowed Job to reshape his rationalism that was focused inward, meaning it was all about Job. It was all about Job. That was focused inward into his own realization, and it went from that so that what God deserved wasn't his questioning nature, but, quote, was Job's pure devotion." So here's my interpretation of that. God let Job feel and see and get a sense and evaluate, through these questions, evaluate God's greatness and God's power. And it's the difference between being told how powerful I am, like if I'm God, instead of me just telling you how powerful I am, he asked these questions. And as he asked these questions, what that did was it let Job kind of decide for himself. Can I say it like that? It's the difference between when you're told to do something versus when you're asked to do something. And there are probably some people in here that if you were told to do something, just because you were told, you're like, not doing it, right? Has anybody ever felt that, the first response when somebody tells you to do something? Well, that's kind of the idea here that, where were you when? What about this? And what about this? And tell me about this if you know. Surely you know because you were there, right? And what about this? And it allows Job to process that information and come to the conclusion himself without just feeling like he's just being told. And I think we've all kind of felt that. Verse 3, then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, this is verse 4, behold, I am insignificant. What can I say in response to you? I put my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not reply, or twice, and I will add nothing more. So in response to God's question, Job laid aside his rage, laid aside his anger, his stubborn challenge of the Lord. At several points during his suffering, Job just gets the guts up, right? He gets the courage up just to question God and even to challenge God. If I just had a fair trial, this would work in my favor. And in doing that, Job, in his anger, was suggesting that there's really a better way to do all this. Okay, the Lord's not running the universe in the way that I think he should. So if I could question him, pull him into a court, a fair court, he would see that he's mistreating me. Okay, that it needs to be run this way, if I could word it like that. But now, obviously, chastened by what God has asked, he replies humbly and with reverence. Job acknowledged before the Lord that Job himself, compared to God, was of little worth, little value, that he was insignificant when compared to God's overall, power, wisdom, and even creative activity. And considering all that God had told him or asked of him, or, the questions, you can feel, even within Job, kind of a sense of shame and embarrassment there. An embarrassment that he'd ever even raised his voice in the first place. Or he'd ever said things like he did in Job 31, verse 7, like a prince, I will approach him. Really? Really? So to register his regret for saying so much, Job basically goes on to say, you know what? I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. He would place his hand over his mouth in order to keep himself from speaking. For indeed, verse 5, he really had nothing to add to what he had already said, and he really didn't want to add any more to what he said. And I would even guess he really didn't even want to bring up the stuff that he had already said. Can I just ask, have any of us ever been in that situation? Even like with people? We've come to find out that oh, wow, we've kind of missed it here. Have I ever tried, what about this one? Have I ever tried to keep quiet and simply receive God's word and understand what he's trying to get across to me? I hope we have. In his first speech that we've already looked at in verses 38 and 39, God exposes Job to all the powers of the universe that he had. In his second speech, which is coming up in verse 40, in chapter 40 and 41, God will present to Job this lordship over morals, over the morality of the universe. And the opening of God's second speech is almost identical to the way he opened up his first speech. Verse 6, then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. You remember that? Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind and said, now tighten the belt on your waist like a man. I will ask you, and you will instruct me. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? And this is God. He's starting his second speech. And so he's going to really reiterate his justice. Because Job really needs to come to an understanding of where justice comes from and that God is just. Verse 8, will you really nullify my justice? The question to Job. Will you really nullify my justice? And knowing Job's attitude toward his suffering, God continues, will you condemn me? Will you condemn me so that you can be justified? Now, I do know that in Scripture we don't find anywhere where Job curses God. Like his wife had told him, remember? She said, just curse God and die. Well, we don't have any record of Job cursing God, but he certainly did call into question God's integrity. He certainly called into question God's integrity, especially allowing him to suffer for no reason or for no apparent reason. Meaning, Job could not think of a reason that was acceptable to Job as why Job was going through this. Did you catch a phrase there? What was the phrase? You want me to say it again? Job couldn't think of a reason that was acceptable to him that explained why he was going through the suffering. What's the phrase there that I'm making sure is there? Yeah, acceptable to him. And Brent, why would I say that? Oh. Brent said, you're always wanting and hoping that it makes sense to you. And one of the things that we'll encourage, even through this study, obviously, is the idea that, yeah, we take our human brain and we think through the process of what's going on with us, what's happening to us, where we are in our life, and the struggles that we're facing. And we use our human wisdom, hopefully that's saturated with God's will, right, to try to figure out what's going on. And that figuring out is either going to be, what do I need to learn here? Or who can I help through this? Or, do I need to change something? In this aspect, Job's not finding any acceptable reason in his mind. So in an almost shocking tone, God sought to adjust Job's attitude by asking him if he thought he had an arm like God, or he had a voice of thunder like God. Verse 9, or do you have an arm like God, and can you thunder with a voice like his? Now that's a poetic way to say what? What's the question? Are you like me? Job seems to have assumed the role of being God's critic, meaning he's at least equal, if not a little bit more, because he's getting it right and God's seemingly missing it. Which is almost, it's almost putting him on the same plane. And therefore, God asked Job if he really thought he was up for such a task. Really, do you have an arm like mine? Do you have a voice like mine? Do you get to decide these things? Because if it was up to Job, if that was his task, Job should be prepared, and you'll see this in the next few verses, Job should be prepared to address himself, Job, as your majesty. Verse 10, adorn yourself with pride and dignity and clothe yourself with honor and majesty. If you got an arm like mine and a voice like mine and you can do what I do, then you should be having a title. In addition, God said if Job's strength matched the Lord's strength, Job should indulge himself in godly anger or righteous indignation. Or you should be out there punishing sin, Job. That's kind of your purpose then. You should be out there righting the wrongs of this world, right? Unleashing Job's terrible wrath by bringing punishment on prideful and sinful people. This is verse 11 and 12. Let out your outburst of anger and look at everyone who is arrogant and humble him. Look at everyone who is arrogant and humble him and trample down the wicked where they stand. Hide them together in the dust, imprison them in the hidden place. Okay, if this is who you are, if you're the judge of the world and you get to decide all this stuff, then do it. And assuming Job could perform all these mighty acts, God concludes he would admit to Job that this mere man possessed the power needed to save himself if this was true. Verse 14, Then, God says, then I will confess to you that your own right hand can save you. Did you know what else is in that? Not only can you save and punish people, you can save yourself. You know, if you can do all this, and you have an arm like mine, and you have a voice like thunder, and you're the giver of what's truly right and wrong, then you can save yourself, Job. In other words, if Job were as mighty and righteous as he seemed to be claiming he was, he didn't need God. Oh. Do you think Job would say that? Would you say that? Now, I know we're in a church building. I get that. You know, sometimes when we're in a church building, we give churchy answers, right? And I'm not sure in a church class we would ever raise our hand. Yes, I would say that. But, have you ever thought about how you've been and as a Christian and how faithful you've been and how solid you've been? And you're like, man, it was really, it's really a message about trying to be justified by our works. Gary. Okay. Yeah, who sinned, right? Right, you're talking about us understanding God's will using John chapter 9, and I'm trying to make sure other people can hear what you said. And the idea that sometimes we miss it, right? We see a situation, and in that time it's like, who sinned? What's going on? What's the sin that was committed here that this guy was born in this condition? And God's answer was, so that his righteousness can be seen, basically. And then, you know, it didn't necessarily make sense to them. It's one of those things when we start thinking of all the good things that we've done and we start trying to use that to justify ourselves, we have to be really careful. Okay? We have to be really careful because that's falling into the idea that because I'm good and because I'm this and this and this, God, you owe me salvation. Right? You know, Job, that's in essence part of his argument. What have I done? I have not done anything to deserve this, so I'm going to show you how great I am, and that's going to prove to you that you're not doing this right because I don't deserve that because I'm good. And I'm not sure any of us are going to be able to stand in front of God and say, God, look how good I am. Is that ringing the bell from another illustration in Scripture in the New Testament? Do you remember the righteous Pharisee that said that prayer? You remember how that went? In Scott's vocabulary, it went something like this. God, aren't you glad I'm not like that guy over there? You are so lucky to have me on your team. If I can be so righteous that God owes me heaven, then do I really need God? This was God's indirect way of convincing Job that he, God, was in fact a moral God and that justice would be done. It's not difficult to imagine Job cowering in the face of God's questioning and rebuke, maybe embarrassed, maybe ashamed after God's, purposeful questioning, especially 38 and 39, and he gets all these questions and he kind of says, man, I'm not even going to say anymore. And so it becomes easy sometimes that we forget to compare ourselves to the holiness of God and the greatness of God. What we end up doing is comparing ourselves with each other. So in comparison to God's power and his holiness, he didn't want to say anything. He felt maybe the same way Isaiah did in Isaiah chapter 6 when Isaiah is confronted, with God. And who am I? Who am I? Surely we would have felt the same, were our circumstances the same, if God questioned us like this. But how easily we forget our place, how easily we inflate our magnificent state, strutting around, showing off our goodness, letting everybody see all the talents that God has given us, let them see our wealth, maybe even become proud of how humble we are. You ever known anybody that's super proud of their humility? And also proud of how holy we are compared to others. Now, if that happens, we need to stop. And we need to take a page from Job right here and listen. Maybe do our best to put our hand over our mouth so that we'll just stop talking. I am God. Who are you, Job? Throughout the rest of God's second major speech, the Lord told Job about his control over the behemoth and his control over the Leviathan. Two creatures known for their size, their strength, and their toughness. And if you do much study on the book of Job, these two creatures are interpreted in so many different ways. So let me share with you a little bit about that. Some have proposed that when God mentioned these two beasts, the behemoth and the Leviathan, that God was referring to commonly known mythical animals, made-up animals. Okay? And that here and in other places, they represent rebellion against God's moral law. Okay? And the stories that would be made up of these mythical characters would have these monsters attempting to defy God's power. And so the message here would be God is in complete control, even against Godzilla and King Kong. Does that make sense? I mean, you'll read commentaries that kind of throw that idea out there. They may not have said Godzilla and King Kong, but you understand the thought there. The other interpretation is not mythical, made-up animals, but actually interpreted literally that these two creatures are seen as giant beasts, and they really are creatures that they would know about back then. Okay, the behemoth, which is talked about in Job 40, verse 15 through 24, as we read about that, we see the behemoth as a land animal, perhaps a hippopotamus, you'll read some commentaries say. Perhaps a hippopotamus, an elephant, or some even suggest that the behemoth was a dinosaur. Okay, the contemporary English version just flat out says hippopotamus, if you have that version. Instead of saying behemoth, it just says hippopotamus. So I'm going to read those verses, 15 through 24, but I'm going to read out of the New American Standard Version. It reads like this, verse 15. Behold, and this is God talking, behold, behemoth, which I made as well as you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold his strength in his waist and his power in the muscles of his belly. He hangs his tail like a cedar. The tendons of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Let his maker bring his sword near. Indeed, the mountains bring him food, and all the animals of the field play there. He lies down under the lotus plants in the hiding place of the reeds in the marsh. The lotus plants cover him with shade. The willows of the brook surround him. If a river rages, he's not alarmed. He is confident, though the Jordan rushes to his mouth. Can anyone capture him when he is on watch? Can anyone pierce his nose with barbs? Whew. Okay, that's the description of him. And so it's always interesting to read commentaries and try to watch what they do to try to figure out who this animal is. And here's what I can tell you for sure, behemoth, right? Behemoth. The Leviathan is chapter 41. And again, we're talking about the idea here that the Leviathan was a real creature. This is sometimes said. Perhaps a crocodile, perhaps a whale, perhaps, or again, some sea type of dinosaur. Because it seems like whatever creature this is, he can live in the water. He seems to be a sea creature. The contemporary English version just flat out says sea monster. Okay, but again, I'm going to read to you out of the New American Standard, and I'm going to begin in verse 1, and I'll read through verse 10, and this is about the Leviathan. Can you drag out Leviathan with a fish hook? Now, can I just pause here? I'm not a fisherman, I went fisherman as a kid, and it was not fun, so I've never went back, if I can help it. But I'm assuming that there's certain hooks that really work with certain fish, and there's certain hooks that don't, right? And I'm sure if you've got a rod and reel and you're trying to catch a whale, it's probably not the right thing to do. Can you drag out Leviathan with a fish hook? And press down his tongue with a rope? Can you put a rope in his nose and pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you, or will he speak to you gentle words? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him as a servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird and tie him down for your young girls? Will the traders bargain for him? Will they divide him among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hand on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. What's that say? You are so far out of your league and trying to mess with this guy, right? Can you lay your hand on him? Remember the battle. You will not do it again. That was verse 8. Verse 9, behold, your expectation is false. Okay, will you be hurled down even at the sight of him? Okay, no one is so reckless that he dares to stir him. Who then is he opposed to me? Can you drag out Leviathan with a fish hook? Now I did some of my own study, so this is like one of those little rabbit holes that I like to go down. So I do want to let you know that word in Job 41 verse 1 is the literal translated word in Hebrew that sounds like Leviathan. So if you're listening to somebody read it in Hebrew, you're going to hear a lot of Hebrew words, then something that you go, oh, that's Leviathan. He just said Leviathan. Okay, that's transliterated. Yes. A what? Yeah, I think I said that just a second ago. That's on this list. Yeah, that's on the list. This isn't the only place in Scripture where Leviathan is mentioned, by the way. So I looked up Psalm 74, and you can read verses 13 and 14. It's kind of interesting. Let me read the two, and then I'll just say a little bit. Verse 13 in the New American Standard. Psalm 74, 13 and 14. You divided the sea by your strength. You broke the heads of the sea monsters in the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. Okay, and I didn't quote any more there. So there's two words here. One is sea monsters in verse 13. That's just a generic word. That is not the transliterated word Leviathan. That's just the generic word. And again, Strong's Concordance says that word is translated dragon, sea monster, serpent, whale. But in verse 14, that's the transliterated word. The transliterated word, you can find this in Brown, Driver, Briggs, a Hebrew and English lexicon. That transliterated word literally can be translated Leviathan, sea monster, dragon. It means basically what that book says. It means a large aquatic animal, perhaps the extinct dinosaur, and then it gives the name of one. And then it says the exact meaning is unknown. And then they have one other little caveat that I'd like to read to you. It says this. This is point 3 under their little definition. Some think this to be a crocodile. But from the description in Job 41, this is patently absurd. Okay, it appears to be a large, fire-breathing animal of some sort. Just as the bombardier beetle has an explosion-producing mechanism, so the great sea dragon may have an explosive-producing mechanism to enable it to be a real fire-breathing dragon. I found that interesting. Has anybody else read that? Okay, let me go to Job and read some of Scripture to see where they get that idea. This is in chapter 41, verse 18. And this is again talking about the Leviathan. His sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the dawn. From his mouth go burning torches, sparks of fire leap forth. From his nostrils smoke goes out, as from a boiling pot, and burns with burning reeds. His breath sets coals aglow, and a flame goes forth from his mouth. In his neck dwells strength, and dismay leaps before him. Verse 26, the sword that reaches him cannot prevail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He regards iron as straw, bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones are turned into stubble for him. Clubs are regarded as stubble. He laughs at the rattling of a javelin. His underparts are like sharp pieces of pottery. He spreads out like a threshing sledge on the mud. He makes the depths boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a jar of ointment. Behind him he illuminates a pathway, and one would think the deep to be gray-haired. Nothing, verse 33, nothing on earth is like him, one made without fear. He looks on everything that is high. He is the king over all the sons of pride. Now, aren't we reading poetic language? I mean, we are. And so I understand that this is poetic language, but I also know that everybody likes to look at that and go, what does he mean by that? What is this? Is this just a terrible terribleness? From dragons to dinosaurs, fire-breathing dragons to dinosaurs to a crocodile, to a sea monster, to a whale, to a big lizard. What are we doing, and what is this? So, if you ever get into this study like I did, and all of a sudden they threw out the word dragon and they threw out the word dinosaur, and then you're like, really? And then you start texting, does the Bible talk about dinosaurs? And then you read a lot of that. I did want to let you know that it's interesting because do y'all know the origin of the word dinosaur? The origin of the word dinosaur, I'll just read to you some of the stuff that I got. And this came from an article entitled The Origin of the Word Dinosaur. In fact, larger-than-life bones were unearthed across England and the United States throughout the 19th century. That means the 1800s. One of these giant fossils appeared to be vertebrae discovered near Oxford, England, and a vertebrae and a fragment of a lower jaw and dagger-like teeth. And a geology professor named William Buckland examined these in 1824. And the source of the bones were eventually called Megalosaurus. That's what the guy came up with. Okay, Megalosaurus, basically this was a made-up name from the Greek words meaning mega, meaning great, huge, mega, and the word sauroso, which means lizard, saurus. So basically, Megalosaurus just means gigantic lizard, right? In case you didn't know, while that's using Greek words to make up an English word, those Greek words weren't ever put together like that before. Just 1 year later, a doctor named Gideon Mantell pondered the teeth and bones of another reptile that had been pulled out of the sandstone in a nearby forest in Sussex. The teeth had serrated edges, were often worn down by chewing, and bore striking resemblance to the modern iguana teeth, except for they were just a lot bigger. And so Mantell named this creature, you ready for this one? Iguanodon. Iguanodon, okay? That was a year later, that was in 1825. In 1833, the same doctor, Dr. Gideon Mantell, would describe yet another species that had seemingly armor built in, and he called it the Hylaeosaurus, which technically that just means woodland lizard. Okay, so they're finding these bones. They're not exactly what sure to make of them, so they're creating names for them. I get that. When Sir Richard Owen, a naturalist and paleontologist, took a look at those three fossils, and he was looking at them kind of together, like making them and trying to make them together, he had a stunning realization. Unlike contemporary reptiles, both the Megalosaurus and the Iguanodon had 5 vertebrae at the base of their spine that appeared to have fused together during their lifetime. And then Owen hypothesized, pause, what does it mean to hypothesize? What is a hypothesis? Okay, it's a guess. It's an educated guess. It's a guess. So Owen hypothesized that the same was true about the Hylaeosaurus. Okay, he didn't have any vertebrae from it. He's just guessing. This is a big thing. This is a big thing. They have this. I bet that does too. So that being the link of all 3 of them, this vertebrae, this mysterious species linked together with this vertebrae, he tried to figure out a name and how to catalog. So he cataloged his observations in an 1841 edition of, quote, Report of the British Association for the Advancement of Science. And this is what he says, quote, the combination of such characters, although peculiar among reptiles, all manifested by creatures far surpassing in size the largest of existing reptiles, will, it is presumed, be deemed sufficient grounds for establishing a distinct tribe or suborder of the saurian reptiles, the lizard-like reptiles, for which I would propose the name Dinosauria. Dinosauria. So what Owen does is, Owen had compounded 2 Greek words, Deinos, which means horrible, horrific, fearful, and then the saurus, which means lizard. So dinosaur literally means the fearful lizard, the horrible lizard. A terrifying lizard. The combination of those Greek words were never used before. He put them together. That is what is called a dinosaur today. And so I do have a little bit of question that's not in my notes. I wonder what they called them back before then. You know, what did man call dinosaurs back then? And I know, you know, we won't know the answer to that necessarily. At this point, what I want to do is, and I know I'm taking you down this rabbit trail of the Leviathan and the Behemoth, okay? And I know I've gotten off on dinosaurs, but you're going to have to indulge me just for a little bit more. I want to show a video that is put out by Apologetics Press. And the guy in the video, his name is Kyle Butt. And Apologetics Press, just a little bit about them. Eric Lyons serves as the executive director. Eric, as well as Kyle Butt, Dave Miller, and Jeff Miller compose the full-time professional writing staff assisted by auxiliary staff of scientists and other writers. This is a website you can go to. It's apologeticspress.org. This is a Church of Christ website of scientists. In fact, I think one of these gentlemen was actually here maybe last year or the year before at Whispering Hills. He came and spoke, which I thought was awesome. A little bit about Kyle Butt, who you'll see in this video. Kyle is a graduate of Freed-Hardeman. He earned a BA with a double major in Bible and communication. He earned a master's in New Testament studies and a master's of divinity with a concentration in apologetics. He has authored or co-authored 35 books and done numerous DVD projects. He's been involved in 3 major debates with unbelievers and speaks frequently around the world on Christian evidences. He has served in the Bible department at Apologetics Press for the last 20 years, and he is editor of the Apologetics Press children's monthly publication called Discovery. I'm saying all that to say this is who it is, because I want to show the video that he has put out. I think we can go ahead and put this on YouTube, and the reason I say that is because it's already on YouTube. That's where I'm getting it. Okay, so I don't think there's any copyright infringements. It's free. You can go to their website and you can watch it. You can click on their link, or you can see it here. So this is a video, and I think it's called Dinosaurs in the Bible. Is that correct? Yeah, Dinosaurs in the Bible. After the video is 7 minutes in length, and I want to hopefully run up here and just say just a few words. Well, let me just say them now, and let's just say when the video's over, class will be over. The words I want to say is, if God could create such awesome beasts, if he could create dinosaurs, if he could create gigantic lizards, how much greater God must be than those animals. In either case, whether they're mythical and made up or they're literal, it really doesn't matter. God's message is meant to encourage Job, okay, to rely on God and his power and his understanding and his justice. Okay, let's watch that video, and then our class will be over.
Dinosaurs in the Bible. What in the world do those two ideas have to do with each other? Well, the Bible presents a very straightforward story of creation. God created the universe in 6 days. He made the swimming and flying animals on the 5th day of creation, and he made all land-living animals and humans on day 6. If that's true, then God created dinosaurs and humans on the very same day, since dinosaurs were land-living creatures. Most books and movies and articles that write about or teach things about dinosaurs hardly ever teach that dinosaurs and humans live together. In fact, they teach that dinosaurs and humans were separated by millions of years. In fact, they teach that dinosaurs died out about 65 million years ago, and that humans evolved in some shape, form, or fashion about 1 million years ago. And so most of the teaching on dinosaurs says that humans and dinosaurs were separated by over 60 million years. Did God create dinosaurs and humans together on the 6th day of creation, or did they evolve millions of years apart? When we look at all the evidence, we find that humans and dinosaurs were indeed together on the earth, just as the Bible says. First, there are numerous places in which humans of the past left depictions of dinosaurs. On the Kachina Natural Bridge in Blanding, Utah, there's a wall carving that the Anasazi Indians put there that one evolutionist stated bears a startling resemblance to a dinosaur. Why would that be something that would startle someone who is an evolutionist? Well, because you're finding something that you didn't expect to find. It's startling, almost gives you a start, a carving of a dinosaur that Indians put there, and showing that Indians could have seen those reptiles. In addition, there's a fossil of a dinosaur that resembles the carving of an Apatosaurus that was found only 45 miles away from the Kachina Natural Bridge. In a temple in Cambodia, we know it was constructed in 1187 AD, and researchers found a carving that resembles a dinosaur there. In fact, one expert in Cambodian art stated that the carving is, and I quote, a very convincing representation of a Stegosaurus. In Peru, ancient Indian burial stones have been found that have animals carved on them that match our understanding of dinosaurs. Interestingly, these stones, they were found beginning in the 1930s, yet they had plant-eating dinosaurs depicted on them that had spikes on their backs. What's unusual about this is that we didn't know that those long-necked, long-tailed plant-eating dinosaurs had spikes on their back until we found fossilized skin in 1991. In addition, in Acambaro, Mexico, there have been hundreds of clay figurines that were unearthed in the 1940s that depicted dinosaurs in various different positions and actions. You add to this the fact that recent dinosaur fossils have been found that aren't complete fossils. They're actually bones that have some soft tissue in them. The bone has been mineralized, but the soft tissue has not. Partial red blood cells and collagen are still present in numerous dinosaur fossils. If these fossils were millions of years old, the fragile soft tissues, they would have long decayed and been mineralized, but they weren't. Furthermore, the Bible is the most historically accurate record available to humans. It says very plainly that God created everything in 6 days. That would mean that dinosaurs and humans were created on the very same day. And the Bible also mentions an animal called a behemoth. And the text states that God made along with humans. It says that behemoth eats grass like an ox. See, now his strength is in his hips and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. His bones are like beams of bronze. You read that in the book of Job, chapter 40, verses 15 and following. Some people have suggested that, well, this has got to be an elephant or a hippopotamus. It doesn't make any sense. Elephants and hippopotamuses, they don't have huge tails that swing like a cedar. What would? A huge plant-eating dinosaur matches the description perfectly. So where did dinosaurs go? And the fact of the matter is many animals have gone extinct in the past. That's nothing new. But the idea of an asteroid hitting the Yucatan Peninsula and causing catastrophic fires and volcanoes killing the dinosaurs and them dying out 65 million years ago, it's got some problems. Crocodiles supposedly were alive then, and crocodiles are still with us. Sharks, turtles. Why those animals still living and not dinosaurs? You see, a better explanation for where dinosaurs went is available. Every time we find a huge dinosaur graveyard, they exist all over the world. What caused those huge graveyards? In virtually every single instance, it was a flood. What flood would have had the power to kill thousands of dinosaurs and bury them in huge mass graveyards all over the world? The global flood of Noah? It provides a perfect answer. But if you're thinking through it, if the flood killed most of the dinosaurs, what about the ancient human artwork? Hey, didn't some people after the flood see them and carve them and depict them on cave walls or burial stones? That means some of the dinosaurs must have been on the ark. But how are you going to get these huge creatures on Noah's ark? Well, the answer is much simpler than most people think. The largest dinosaur egg that we've ever found is about 24 inches long. Noah simply could have taken freshly hatched dinosaurs on the ark. That would have taken care of lots of the problems of the room that you would have needed to house them and the food that you would have needed to feed them. You know, when we get to look at all the evidence, we realize that when we really know about dinosaurs and all of the facts, those fit perfectly with the story of creation found in the Bible. On day 6, God created humans and all land animals, including dinosaurs.